Part 2. His relief at hearing from Helen did nothing to alleviate Ralph's insomnia. The premature weekend continued, and by Labor Day he was opening his eyes around 2:45 in the morning. By the 10th of September, the day when Ed Neepno was arrested again, this time along with 15 others, Ralph's average night's sleep had shrunk to roughly 3 hours, and he had begun to feel quite a little bit something like something on a slide under a microscope. "Just a lonely little protozoa, that's me," he thought as he sat in the wingback chair staring at Harris Avenue side, and wished he could sure as fuck laugh. His list of surefire, never-miss folk remedies continued to grow, and it had occurred to him more than once that he could write an amusing little book on the subject, if that was he ever got enough sleep to make organized thinking possible again. This late summer he was doing well to slide into matching socks every day, and his mind kept returning to his purgatorial efforts to find cup of soup in the kitchen cabinet on the day Helen had been beat. There had been no return to that level since, because he had managed to get at least some sleep every night, but Ralph was terribly afraid he would arrive there again, and perhaps places beyond there, if things did not improve. There were times, usually sitting in the wingback chair at 4:30 in the morning, he swore he could actually feel his brain draining. The remedies urged from the sublime to the ridiculous. The best example of the former was a full-color brochure advertising the wonders of the Minnesota Institute for Sleep Studies in St. Paul. A fair example of the latter was the Magic Eye, an all-purpose amulet sold through supermarket tabloids like the National Enquirer and Inside View. Sue, the counter girl at the Red Apple, bought one of these and presented it to him one afternoon. Ralph looked down at the badly painted blue eyes staring at him from the medallion, which he believed had probably stared at life as a poker chip, and felt wild laughter bubbling up inside him. He somehow managed to suppress it until he had regained the safety of his own upstairs apartment across the street, and for that he was very grateful. The gravity which Sue had given it dreaded through the eyelet on top, and suggested it cost her a fair amount of money. She had regarded Ralph with something close to awe since the day the two of them had rescued Helen. This made Ralph uncomfortable, but he had no idea what to do about it. In the meantime, he supposed it didn't hurt to wear the medallion so she could see the shape of it under his shirt. It didn't help him sleep at all, though. After taking his seaman in Ralph's part in the deep-nosed domestic problems, Detective John Laydecker had pushed back his desk chair, laced his fingers together behind his not considerable breadth of neck, and said that Bill had told him Ralph suffered from insomnia. Ralph allowed that he did. John nodded, rolled his chair forward again, and clasped his tiny hands atop the litter of paperwork beyond which the surface of his desk was mostly buried, and looked at Ralph seriously. "Honeycomb." His tone of voice reminded Ralph of Bill's tone when he had suggested that whiskey was the answer, and his reply now was exactly the same. "I beg your pardon? My grandfather swore by it," Laydecker said. "A little piece of honeycomb just before bedtime. Suck the honey out of the comb, chew the wax a little, like you would a wad of gum, then spit it out. Bees secrete some sort of natural sedative when they make honey. Puts you right out." "No kidding," Ralph said, and simultaneously believing it was utter crap and believing every word. Why would a person get honeycomb, you think? "Nutra, the health food store out at the mall. Try it. By this week next time, your troubles are going to be over." Ralph enjoyed the experiment. The comb honey was so sweetly powerful it seemed to suffuse his whole being. He still woke at 3:10 by the first dosage, 3:08 after the second, and at 3:07 after the third. By then, the small piece of honeycomb he purchased was gone, and he went out Nutra right away for another one. Its value as a sedative may be nil, but it made a wonderful snack. He only wished he had discovered it earlier. He tried putting his feet in warm water. Lois bought him something called an all-purpose gel wrap from the catalog. You put it around your neck. It was supposed to take care of your arthritis as well as help you sleep. It didn't either for Ralph, but he had only the mildest case of arthritis to begin with. Following a chance meeting with Sugar Vachon at Nicky's lunch, he tried chamomile tea. "That cammy's a beaut," Trick told him. "You gonna sleep great, Ralphie." And it did. Right until 2:58 a.m. that was. Those are the folk remedies and homeopathic remedies he tried. Ones he didn't include mega-vitamin packages, which cost more than Ralph could afford to spend on his fixed income, a yoga position called the Dreamer, as described by the postman. The Dreamer sounded Ralph like a fine way to get a look at your own hemorrhoids, and marijuana. Ralph considered this last one very carefully before deciding it would be very likely to turn out to be an illegal version of the whiskey and the honeycomb and the camo tea. Besides, if Bill found out Ralph was smoking pot, he would never hear the end of it. And through all these experiments, a voice in his brain kept asking him if he was really going to have to get down to Eye of Newt and Tongue of Toad before he gave up and went to the doctor. The voice was not so much critical as genuinely curious. Ralph had become fairly curious himself. On September 10th, the day of the first Friends of Life demonstration for woman care, Ralph decided that he would try something from the drugstore, but not the Rexall downtown where he'd gotten Carol's prescriptions filled. They knew him down there, knew him well, and he didn't want Paul Durgan, the Rexall druggist, to see him buying sleeping pills. It was probably stupid, like going across town to buy rubbers at the Rite Aid across from Stratford Park, so that was where he meant to go. If the drugstore version of Newt's Eye and Toad's Tongue didn't work, he really would go to the doctor. Is that true, Ralph? Do you really mean it? I do, he said out loud as he walked slowly through Harris Avenue in the bright September sunshine. Be damned if I'll put up with this much longer. Big talk, Ralph, the voice replied skeptically. Bill and Lois were standing outside the park, having what looked like an animated discussion. Bill looked up, saw him, and motioned for him to come over. Ralph went, not liking the combination of their expressions. Bright and interest on Bill's face, distress and worry on Lois's. Have you heard about the thing out at the hospital? Yes, as Ralph joined him. It wasn't at the hospital, and it wasn't a thing, McGovern said testily. It was a demonstration, that's what they called it anyway, and it was at Woman Care, which is actually behind the hospital. They took a bunch of people to jail, somewhere between 6 and 24. Nobody really seems to know yet. One of them was Ed Deepno, Lois said breathlessly, and Bill shot her a disgusted glance. He clearly believed that handling this piece of news had been his job. Ed! Ralph said, startled. Ed's in Fresh Harbor! Wrong, Bill said. The battered known for Dora he was wearing today gave him a slightly rakish look, like a paperman in a 40s crime drama. Ralph wondered if Panama was still lost or had merely been retired for the fail. Oh. Today, he's once more cooling his heels in our picturesque city jail. What exactly happened? But neither of them really knew. At that point, the story was little more than a rumor which had spread through the park like a contagious head cold. A rumor which was of particular interest in this part of town because Ed's name was attached to it. Marie Callan had told Lois that there had been rock throwing involved, and that was why the demonstrators had been arrested. According to Stan, who passed the story on to Bill shortly before Bill ran into Lois, someone, it might have been Ed, it might have well been one of the others, maced a couple of doctors as they used a walkway between Woman Care and the back entrance to the hospital. This walkway was technically public property and had become a favorite haunt of anti-abortion demonstrators during the 7 years that Woman Care had been providing abortions on demand. The two versions of the story were so vague and conflicting that Ralph felt he could reasonably hope neither was true, that perhaps it was just the case with a few over-enthusiastic people who had been arrested for trespassing or something. In places like Derry, that kind of thing happened. Stories had a way of inflating like beach balls as they were passed from mouth to mouth. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this time it would turn out to be more serious because both the Bill version and the Lois version included Ed Deepno, and Ed was not your average anti-abortion protester. This one, after all, the guy who had pulled a clump of his wife's hair right out of her scalp, rearranged her dental work, and fractured her cheekbone simply because he had seen her name on a petition which mentioned woman care. This was the guy who seemed honestly convinced that someone was calling himself the Crimson King. It would be a great name for a pro wrestler, Ralph thought, was running around Derry. That his means were hauling their unborn victims out of town on flatbed trucks, plus a few pickups with the fetuses barreled into stuff smoked weed gum. No, he had an idea that if Ed had been there, it had probably not been just the case of someone accidentally bonked on the head with a protest sign. Let's go out to my house, Lois proposed suddenly. I'll call Simone Castonguay. Her niece is the day receptionist at Woman Care. If anybody knows exactly what happened up there this morning, it'll be Simone. She'll have called Barbara. I was just on my way down to the supermarket. Ralph said it was a live course, but surely a very small one. The market stood next to the Rite Aid in the strip mall half a block down from the park. Why don't I stop in on my way back? All right, Lois said, smiling at him. We'll expect you in a few minutes, won't we, Bill? Yes, Bill said, and suddenly swept her into his arms. It was a bit of a reach, but he managed. In the meantime, I'll have you all to myself. Oh, Lois, how those sweet minutes fly. into a fly. Just inside the park, a group of young women with babies and strollers, a gossip of mothers, Ralph thought, had been watching them, probably attracted by Lois's gestures, which had a tendency to become grandiose when she was excited. Now, as Bill bent Lois backward, looking down at her with the counterfeit ardor of a bad actor at the end of a stage tango, one of the mothers spoke to another and both laughed. It was a shrill, unkind sound that made Ralph think of chalk squealing on blackboards and forks dragged across porcelain sinks. "Look at the funny old people," laughter said. "Look at the funny old people pretending to be young again." "Stop that, Bill!" Lois said. She was blushing, maybe not just because Bill was up to his usual shit. She also heard the laughter from the park. McGovern undoubtedly had too, but McGovern believed they were laughing with him, not at him. Sometimes Ralph thought warily a slightly inflated ego could be a protection. Bill let her go, then removed his fedora and swept it across his waist as he made an exaggerated bow. Lois was too busy making sure that her silk blouse was still tucked into the waistband of her skirt all the way around to pay him much notice. Her blush was already fading, and Ralph saw she looked rather pale and not particularly well. He prayed she wasn't coming down with something. "Come by if you can," she told Ralph quietly. "I will, Lois." McGovern slipped an arm around her waist, a gesture of affection, both friendly and sincere this time, and they stared up the street together. Watching them, Ralph was suddenly gripped by a strong sense of déjà vu, as if he had seen them like that in some other place, or some other life. Then, just as Bill dropped his arm, breaking the illusion, it came to him. Fred Astaire leading a dark-haired and rather plump Ginger Rogers out into a small-town movie set, where they would dance together to some tune by Jerome Kern or maybe Irving Berlin. "That's weird," he thought, running back toward the little strip mall halfway up Mile Hill. "That's very weird." Ralph, Bill, McGovern, and Lois Chester were about as far from Fred Astaire "Ralph," Lois called, and he turned back. There was one intersection about a block's worth of distance between them now. Cars zipped back and forth on Elizabeth Street, turning Ralph's view of them into a moderate study. "What?" he called back. "You look better! More rest? Are you finally getting some sleep?" "Yes," he returned, just thinking. Just another small lie in another good cause. "Didn't I say you feel better once the seasons change? See you in a little while." Lois wiggled her fingers at him, and Ralph was amazed, to see bright blue diagonal lines stream back from the short but carefully shaped nails. They looked like contrails. What the fuck? He shut his eyes tight and popped them open again. Nothing. Only Bill and Lois once again walking up the street toward Lois's house, their backs, so no bright blue diagonals on the air, nothing like that. Ralph's eyes dropped to the sidewalk, and he saw that Lois and Bill were leaving tracks behind them on the concrete. Tracks that looked exactly like the footprints in the old Arthur Murray learned to dance instructors used to be able to get by mail order. Lois's were gray. Bill's, larger but solidly delicate, were a darker shade of olive green. They glowed on the sidewalk, and Ralph, who was standing on the far side of Elizabeth Street with his jaw hanging almost down to his breastbone, suddenly realized he could see little ribbons of colored smoke rising from them, or perhaps it was steam. A city bus for Old Cape snored by, momentarily blocking his view, and when it passed, the tracks were gone. There was nothing on the sidewalk but a message chalked out inside a faintly pink heart. "Sam and Deanie forever." "Those tracks are not gone, Ralph. They were never there in the first place. You know that, don't you?" Yes, he knew. The idea that Bill and Lois looked like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers had gotten into his head, progressing from that idea into a hallucination of phantom footprints leading up the sidewalk like tracks in an Arthur Murray dance diagram, had been a certain bizarre logic. Still, it was scary. His heart was beating too fast. When he closed his eyes for a moment to try to calm down, he saw those marks trailing up from Lois's waving fingers like bright blue jet contrails. "I've got to get some sleep," Ralph thought. "I've got to. If I don't, I'm about to start seeing anything." "That's right," he muttered under his breath as he turned toward the drugstore again. "Anything at all."